What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with another subscriber Q&A video. And a number of you said, hey, I'd like to see this be a regular part of your channel. And I would love for it to be. I've tried a few times to make this a regular part of my channel, but the questions always fizzle out. So that's where I depend on you guys, my subscriber community, to send me in more questions. So if you don't see your question here, or if you do see your question here and you have another question, go ahead and drop it in the comments below for this one, and we'll try to make this as regular as we can. But I got some really great questions this time, and most of these are tied to the giveaways I've got going for the Captain Rex No Man Left Behind medallions, which we will give away very shortly to 2 lucky winners. Thanks to Matthew C. and Eric B., 2 channel subscribers who sent those to me as a channel gift. So thank you again to Matt and to Eric. Let's go ahead and dig right into some really great questions, by the way. You guys are way more intelligent and thoughtful with your questions than I would ever imagine myself to be. So congrats on that. All right, this is a great one. What is the average or expected price for a full set of loose graded first 92? This is a great question. This is from Clobber Online. Thank you, Clobber, for the question. So I went to the expert. I went to the person that I know knows loose figure prices better than anybody, at least from my friends list, and that is Chris W. over at Rogue 5 Toys on Facebook. If you're not a member, you're missing out on some great prices. I just showed you guys 2 figures that just returned from grading with Collector Archive Services, a Lobot and a No COO Yoda. Both of them got 85s. I purchased both of them from Chris, so make sure to go check them out. Again, I'll put the link for their Facebook page in the description for this video. But this is a good question. So I asked Chris. Chris said that if you're going to include the full 92, really, I'm going full 96. I'm including, like, you know, the last 17 figures, all that good stuff. And he says that $10,000 will buy you a near mint set, a full set of the vintage Star Wars figures. $10,000. Now, if you're not as picky on condition and you want to get some that are pretty good, like 75, 80 condition versus 85 condition, loose, complete with accessories, you could probably get it. You could probably pull it off for about $8,000 and go down from there depending on condition and depending on which character you're talking about. Like a blue Snaggletooth and a Yak Face and a Luke Stormtrooper are going to be a lot more expensive than Neon Numb. So keep all that in mind. But that gives you a rough price range. I'd say $8,000 to $10,000. He said $10,000 at the very upper end. Now, of course, that's always changing and always increasing, especially with last 17 prices. And we've got a question on that a little bit later in this video, so stick around for that. Kane Cow, he says, do you think the grading companies will ever get their act together when it comes to wait times being over a year in some cases? This is a great question, and this is exactly the experiment I have running. If you go back on my channel, under the graded collectibles industry playlist, I've got a playlist devoted to kind of talking about broadly about graded collectibles. And in January, I started a great turnaround time experiment. I sent off, I sent off 5 items to Collector Archive Services and 5 items to AFA on the exact same day. So we're going to see which one wins on the turnaround time. Now, I will say this. For my last batch that I just unboxed on my channel, I believe it came out on Wednesday, that batch was faster. It was faster. Collector Archive Services shaved about a month to a month and a half off of what I've been used to for the last year or so. They had been running about 7.5 months, and this last batch took about 6 months. So keep that in mind. And I've talked to a couple of other collectors that have submitted to CAS. They've both said it's been about 6 months on the dot. AFA, they said that they're going to have my batch back to me by May, which would be about 5 months. So if they get it back in 5 months, they will win. They will win, because my batch with CAS, I'm not expecting it back any earlier than June, based on current turnaround times. I don't think they're going to shave off a month between now and when that batch gets done. So if AFA actually does, if it actually does get done by May, they will win the turnaround time experiment. I don't think they will, though. I personally expect that both companies are going to continue to be really backlogged until we have our next recession. I mean, that's just a fact. People have a lot of disposable income who are collecting right now, and prices, with what prices are doing for graded collectibles, it's natural that people who are in the business or in the hobby to, as a job, who buy collectibles and then send them off to get graded and then turn around and resell them at a premium, Well, they're going to keep doing that while the prices continue to go up. And as we talk about in my daily, not daily, but weekly updates for the vintage Kenner line and the prices that people are commanding, there are new price records being set every single week for some figures. So I don't expect there to be any slowdown in the near term, but we'll see. Wooden Jedi, he says, interesting topic and questions. Question for you today is outside of the missing original 96 figures, which character would you most like to see in the vintage collection? And I might have already answered this. I can't remember. If I did, I apologize for repeating this question, but I thought it was an interesting one to focus on, and I would love to hear y'all's answers on this. For me, I've got two figures that I most want to have in the vintage collection, and that's the Grand Inquisitor, which I think is going to happen, and Thrawn, which I think is going to happen. I think both of those are absolutely going to happen at some point for the vintage collection, and Grand Inquisitor is going to be in for the Black Series too. I'd be really shocked if he's not. He looks like he's going to be the main villain within the Obi-Wan TV series coming out at the end of May. So it's a no-brainer for them to include him, along with probably an updated Obi-Wan Kenobi. Probably the second sister will make her appearance as a TVC character. So I think the two big wants for me are them. And then after that, it's really the Rebels team. Sabine Wren, Chopper, I'd like to see as part of the line. Zeb Aurelius, Ezra Bridger, Kanan Jarrus. I'd love to see all those. Eris Syndulla. Those are just, I would flip out if they actually came out with like a big 4-pack, kind of like the Amazon, but do a 5-pack with the Rebels team. Or if they did a HasLab with the Ghost and the Rebels team, I think I'd have to buy it. I don't have the space for it, but I can tell you I'd probably buy it. So I hope that all of those come up at some point, and I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts there. Charles Knox, thank you, Charles, for watching. He's a longtime commenter and subscriber. What TVC 1.0 don't you have? A lot, Charles. I don't have a lot of TVC 1.0. I am late to the game. I admit I am late to the game. I am not like Boss Bounty or Only One Kenobi or some of these other TVC collectors out there and YouTubers who have been with the collection since the 2010 line. I came into it really probably in 2020, 2021, somewhere in there. And so I'm fairly new to it, and I don't have a lot of TVC 1.0, nor do I expect to. I just don't have the room to have all of TVC 1.0. I thought about it, and I sort of attempted it, but after a while, I realized that it's an impossible task. So now I just collect the characters that I like. TVC 1.0 figures that I want. I want a Grievous. I want a Commander Gree, and I would like to have a Republic Trooper and a Shea Vizsla. So those are the four big wants for me. I'm sure I'd think of others if I was really thinking about it, but those are kind of the TVC 1.0 figures that I really want to have. Frozen, he says, what exactly keeps your passion and interest in Star Wars alive, not just collecting, but Star Wars in general as a universe? This is a topic that I have thought about a lot, actually, and it's a great question, and it's a topic that I've thought about, what would be a fun live stream kind of comment or topic with some of my friends of the channel. And for me, this is just me, but I'm an avid reader of the Expanded Universe novels, whether it's the Thrawn books or the High Republic books that have just come out recently. Some of the video game related ones like the Battlefront, what's it called? The name of it escapes me now, but there's a Battlefront related book by Alexander Freed that is a must read. But the Thrawn trilogy, there's been 2 trilogies now by Timothy Zahn, newer trilogies for Thrawn. I've read each of those multiple times. I've read all of the High Republic universe books multiple times. Right now I'm rereading the Alphabet Squadron books by Alexander Freed. Alexander Freed's one of my favorite writers other than Timothy Zahn. So if you haven't checked out any of his books, make sure you do, because you're missing out on some fantastic content in the Expanded Universe. But I think that's what keeps my passion alive for it. And why I reread them is because I catch nuances. I catch different worlds, different smaller characters that end up sometimes showing up in the Disney Plus content, such as Operation Cinder. That was a big thing within the Alphabet Squadron books that made a mention in The Mandalorian season 2. So a lot of that stuff, I love tying all that information together. I love trying to remember it all. And it's just kind of a cool thing to make the universe seem more real. And it drives my wife crazy, and it drives my kids crazy. Like, you're reading that book again? Haven't you read that book like 4 times? But that's what I do. Oh, Twilight Company's the name of the book. If you haven't read Twilight Company, you got to read it. It's an awesome book. Give it a read, give it a little time, and then reread it, and you'll realize just how tightly wound and perfect that book is written. It's an awesome book. You got to read it. Okay, what else we got? Isaiah Cullifer. He says, do you think vintage Star Wars will peak in price anytime soon, or do you think it could still keep going for the next year or more? Thank you, AFG. Thank you, Isaiah. Great question, and if I knew the answer to that, I would make a lot of money. If I knew what was going to happen with vintage prices, I'd probably, I'm serious. I would be very tempted. If I knew that prices were going to drop off the face of the earth, I'd probably sell my collection and start over again. Start over again once prices reset. It's going to happen at some point. And I don't know if we'll have a major reset or if we'll have like a pause in prices or a slight dip in prices. There's always undulations. There's peaks and valleys, troughs, things like that. But I don't know what's going to happen with prices. And it ties into a lot of the topics outside of just collecting that I've talked about on the channel. Inflation, recessionary kind of signs, world conflict, all of these supply commodities, and all this stuff ties together. Stock prices and the labor market, and all that stuff ties to what our economy is doing. And there are so many warning signs that we're gonna have a recession sooner rather than later. A lot of the financial experts on Wall Street are predicting a recession in 2023. Me personally, I think it's going to be the end of this year in 2022. But whether that affects collectibles is another story, because people that have collectibles, not all of them, but a lot of them that have these high-end collectibles especially, they're recession proof. If you have a rocket firing Boba Fett that costs you $200,000, I don't think a recession is going to keep you from buying anymore. It might make prices a little bit lower, but those collectors that are big boy collectors who would probably be natural collectors for some of the graded stuff in my collection, I'm not sure if they have nearly the price worries for a lot of this stuff that maybe you and I have. And I have a nice collection. I'm not trying to say that I don't have a nice collection, but I think if I sell it all at once, it's gonna be a big number. But I just don't know if I'll ever get around to doing it. If I needed the money, I think I would. But I have no idea what prices are gonna do. Me personally, I think prices have to take a pause because they've gotten so ridiculous. And I think we'll talk more about that here with some of the other questions if memory serves. David Steffen says, we have recently seen prices of Boba Fett action figures rocketing upwards after the Book of Boba Fett TV series. Do you think we'll have a similar effect with the Obi-Wan Kenobi figures? And this is a good question. I would argue that the spike in Boba Fett action figures is not related to the Book of Boba Fett. Or if it is, it's very tangentially related to it. I think Boba Fett figures in general they always command a premium. Excuse me, my throat is dry. They've always been the Boba Fett tax. We've talked about that. Maybe the Book of Boba Fett drew in some new people, but the Book of Boba Fett wasn't very good. I mean, let's be honest, folks. The episodes that were good didn't have Boba Fett in them. So I do think the new Obi-Wan series is going to be much better. I really do. And I have seen, we just talked about on the channel in a recent market update, yesterday actually, that Obi-Wan, an AFA 85 loose graded Obi-Wan sold for $430. That's a big number. And we see a lot of the 12-backs command big money. But Obi-Wan is never going to be Boba Fett in terms of prices. I think that we could see an uptick if the show is successful and does really well, which I think it will. I think it looks fantastic, and it looks way better, light years better than the Boba Fett show. But will we see the massive spike in prices that we've seen with Boba Fett figures? I doubt it. Boba Fett is kind of an entity on its own, as a lot of my friends have talked about. I don't think that we're going to see that kind of massive spike in Obi-Wan related figures, but I could be wrong. We'll see. I got a fly buzzing around as I try to do this, but that's a great question though, David, and only time will tell. And I plan on covering that in a little bit more detail in a video probably later this month before the show airs. Jeff Moore says, my question is all about collection rooms. What temperature do you keep your room at? Is there a specific temperature and humidity level that the room should be? And what is your holy grail item that you're looking for? Well, first of all, if you notice behind me, I have massive sunlights or sun windows, whatever you call those, skylights behind me on this wall, and it's always been a problem to try and keep this room cool during the summer months. So I did add these kind of reflective, I tinted the windows with these massive, it blocks out about 90% of the UV light. And I also added these blackout curtains, which they're kind of bright right now because of the lighting, but in general, it does keep it very, very dark in here. And so I would say that about 85 to 90% of the UV light that hits this room during the afternoons is blocked out. So that's that. I believe in that. You know, I'm a firm believer of that. I try to keep the room around 70 degrees, which I don't know if that's the right temperature. I would say the cooler the better in general. I haven't noticed any of my blisters on my mint on card figures starting to yellow or anything like that. I haven't noticed my loose graded figures that are not in archival cases start to yellow like Leia's or Hoth Stormtroopers. But certainly the risk is there. But I try to minimize light, UV light, by having everything blacked out as best I can, and I try to keep the temperature around 70 degrees. The cooler the better, I think, but it does get hotter than 70 degrees during the summer months. I'm in Tennessee. It gets up to 100 degrees during August and July, and my AC, my air conditioner, cannot keep up with it. So it does get warmer than that for a limited amount of time, but I haven't seen any massive change in my collection. Maybe it'll happen, I don't know, but I've been in this house now for let's see, about 10 years. So it's a long time, and my figures, I haven't seen any change in them. So I'm hoping that that'll continue until I'm worm food. Okay. Next question, Tony Barber. He says, what is the best vintage collection, you know, the 1977 to 1985 run by Kenner that I have seen to date? For me, I think the best collection I've personally ever seen is Jeff Jacobs. He runs Jeff's Collectible Empire Toy Shop, JCE Toy Shop. I've talked about him in the market updates. I've bought from him both CGC graded comics as well as vintage Star Wars toys. He has the single best collection, in my opinion. He just updated his collection room. It's truly incredible. He's got pretty much every character on every single card back ever released. He's got every proof card. He's got loose graded, every single loose graded variant. He's got every vehicle, both loose graded as well as mint and sealed box. It's a massive collection that probably spans about 6,000 or 7,000 square feet. In terms of best, highest end collection, that's probably it. There's certainly larger collections out there, but larger doesn't always necessarily mean better, in my opinion. So I think in terms of cleanest, most valuable collection, that's probably it. But it all depends on what you like. Some people don't like graded stuff, so that wouldn't appeal to them at all. But for how I collect, Jeff Jacobs has got the best collection out there, and he's got YouTube videos on YouTube for they're older, and so they're not up to date, but it'll show you some pretty incredible stuff if you wanted to see it on YouTube. Just look up Jeff Jacobs Star Wars, and it'll pop up. My Holy Grail is one I've already got in my collection. That's the Toxic Limbs Bosk. I don't know if I'd necessarily have any true Holy Grails that I want to get. I would like, in terms of expensive loose graded figures, I'd like to get a Red Bar R5. That's probably next on my hit list. I'd like to get him before the end of this year. I don't know if it'll happen though, but that's probably the most expensive loose graded figure that I'm looking to add to my collection sooner rather than later. Whether it happens or not, we'll see. I've got to find one at a fair price, and that's always tough in the current environment. Next up, Shatter Cookie. He says, your channel rocks. Thank you, Shatter Cookie. Do you think last 17 loose prices will ever go down, or will they keep going up? I'm trying to complete my full run, but mostly need the last 17. Keep making great videos. Thank you, Shatter Cookie. I personally think the last 17 figures are never going to go down. I mean, if they go down, it's going to be with everything else during a recession. But last 17, they're produced in fewer numbers. The ones that have very specific last 17 accessories, you know, like the Luke Stormtrooper with the black blaster, or, you know, the Lando, General Lando with that certain palace blaster. I mean, all of those figures, like the A-Wing pilot with that specific blaster, those accessories continue to command big money. And it's the accessories, really, that drive the prices for a lot of those last 17 figures. But I think that combined with the smaller manufacturing batches, since they were produced at the very end of Kenner's heyday when the line was starting to fizzle out, I don't know if last 17 figures will ever drop. And I don't really have that many of them, to be honest with you. I think I've only got a Yak Face and like a Paploo or something. But, you know, it's not really... those figures, for the most part, are not ones that interest me that much. But if you're looking to get the last 17 and you're trying to complete your full run, my best advice is to go ahead and just grab them when you can, and sooner rather than later, because I don't expect those to ever go down. Last question from Hollow Chronicles. Hollow Chronicles is he's always got great content. What's the biggest bang for the buck as far as an increase in grading goes? A 75 to an 80, 80 to an 85, 85 to a 90. This is a question that we kind of tangentially talk about in the market updates. I think for me personally, it depends on the character, but usually a broad rule of thumb is going from an 85 to a 90 is where you're going to see the massive price jump. And it's just there's so few 90s on a census for loose graded figures or for carded figures especially, that going from an 85 to a 90, it's usually many multiples, at least 2, but sometimes 3, 4, or 5 multiples versus an 85. So it just depends on the figure too. If it's a super rare figure, then I think that's even more applicable. If it's a common figure like a Hong Kong Weequay, for example, going from an 85 to a 90, you may not see that big of a bump. So it just depends on the figure, but usually a broad rule of thumb, in my opinion, and other people might disagree with this, but I think going from an 85 to a 90 is where you're going to see the biggest jump in price. That's all I really had for this video. I hope you enjoyed these questions. If you liked it and you want to keep the gravy train rolling, leave me another question below, and we'll be back soon.